In the first week of December 1985, Donna Reed picked up the telephone in her house in Beverly Hills and called the producer of Dallas. She had been playing Miss Ellie Ewing on Dallas for one season, having replaced Barbara Bel Geddes in the role when Bel Geddes had left the show for health reasons of her own. She had been, across that season, doing what she had always done in whatever professional context she found herself, giving the work what the work required, being present and professional and warm and engaged with the material in the way of a performer who has never stopped taking the work seriously, regardless of what the scale of the opportunity is. The telephone call was brief. She told the producer that she was going to have to leave the show. The producer asked why. She said she had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She said the diagnosis was recent and the prognosis was the prognosis that pancreatic cancer in 1985 produced, which was not an optimistic prognosis. She said she would not be able to continue. The producer expressed the condolences that the news required. The call ended. She had been on the show for one season. She had taken the role because the role was available and because she was 64 years old, and the roles available to a 64-year-old actress in the Hollywood of 1985 were not numerous in the way that roles had not been numerous for women of that age in any previous decade of the Hollywood she had been working in. She had taken the role, and she had done the work, and she had been, by all accounts, genuinely good in it in the way she had always been genuinely good in things, which is to say, not flashily good, but solidly good, dependably good, good in the specific way that the people who work with you notice and value, even when the critics and the awards apparatus do not always register it in the terms that the critics and the awards apparatus prefer. She had been dying during the season. The diagnosis was new. She had not known at the beginning of the season what the diagnosis would eventually confirm. But the symptoms had been there, and the symptoms had been managed, and the work had proceeded with the specific quality of professional commitment that Donna Reed brought to professional commitments, and the audience had watched her on Dallas on Friday nights and had not known. She died on January the 14th, 1986. She was 64 years old. She died 6 weeks after the phone call to the producer, which is the specific compressed timeline of pancreatic cancer in its advanced stages. The disease that produces in the people it affects, the specific terrible swiftness of an illness that gives almost no warning before it has reached the stage at which the warning is no longer the point. Tonight, my friend, I want to tell you who Donna Reed was. Not the public version, not Donna Stone from The Donna Reed Show, not Elsie Ames from The Best Years of Our Lives, not Mary Hatch from It's a Wonderful Life. Though all of those performances are real and all of them deserve the attention that the real consideration of her work requires. The full version, the version that the one season of Dallas and the phone call to the producer and the 6 weeks between the phone call and the death were the culmination of, because here is what I want you to understand before we go back to Iowa, before we go to the farm and the specific origin that produced the specific person who became Donna Reed. The phone call to the producer in December of 1985 was the most honest professional communication of her career. Not the most significant. The Oscar speech was more significant. The negotiations for The Donna Reed Show were more professionally consequential. But the most honest, because the phone call said the thing plainly, and without the management that 50 years of professional life in the Hollywood entertainment industry installs in the people who survive it. And the saying of the plain thing was, for Donna Reed, the most unusual and, in some ways, the most revealing thing she ever did in a professional context. She had spent 50 years managing the image, managing the material, managing the relationship between who she was and what the industry required of her to be. The managing had been necessary and had been skilled and had produced the career, not only the Donna Stone career, the specific, beloved, apparently uncomplicated career of the woman who played the perfect American wife and mother on television for 8 years. But the larger career that the Donna Stone years had both sustained and obscured. The career that included the Oscar and the dramatic work and the specific quality of understated, precise intelligence that the best of her performances expressed, and that the television show's commercial requirements did not always call upon. The phone call to the producer was the end of the managing. It was the moment when there was nothing left to manage, when the management itself was no longer possible, and when the plain statement of the plain fact was the only available option. She said, "I have cancer. I cannot continue." She hung up. She died 6 weeks later. Come with me. We are going back to the beginning, to Denison, Iowa, in the year 1921. Donna Bell Mullinger was born on the 27th of January, 1921, in Denison, Iowa, the fourth of 6 children, born to William Richard Mullinger and Hazel Jane Shives Mullinger. The family was farming in the specific way of Iowa farming families in the early 20th century, organized around the land, organized around the rhythms of what the land required and what the land produced, organized around the specific values that the relationship to the land installs in the people who have it as their central economic and geographic fact. Her father was a farmer, not a prosperous farmer in the sense of a farmer who has accumulated enough of the specific success that farming allows to have moved beyond the immediate requirements of the farm. A working farmer whose days were organized around the work and whose family was organized around the support of the work, and whose relationship to the world beyond the farm was the relationship of a man whose world was, primarily, the farm. She grew up on the farm. The childhood was not unhappy. The accounts of her early years, given in interviews across the decades of her career, and in the biographical materials that the career generated, describe a childhood that was specific and rooted in the specific way of childhoods in agricultural communities, where the specificity of the place and the relationships is the material from which the self is constructed. She had siblings, she had the farm, she had the particular texture of Iowa in the 1920s and 1930s, the light, the seasons, the specific quality of the American Midwest that people who grew up in it carry with them regardless of where the subsequent life takes them. She was pretty from the beginning in the specific way that some children are pretty. Not the generic prettiness of a child who will be told she is pretty and who will grow into an adult whose prettiness is a pleasant feature of their life, without being its organizing principle, but the specific prettiness of a face that the subsequent decades would confirm was going to be useful in a particular way, and that the people around her recognized from early as something worth noting. She was, more importantly, intelligent. This is the fact about Donna Reed that the mythology of Donna Stone tends to obscure, because Donna Stone was not primarily a character of intelligence, but a character of warmth and competence and the specific quality of domestic graciousness that the show required, and the qualities that make a performer excellent at playing a character of warmth and competence are not the same qualities as the intelligence that the performer actually possesses. She was intelligent. She was intelligent in the way that the people who worked with her and who knew her off the set described with the consistency. That means the observation is accurate rather than polite, not the performed intelligence of someone who has learned to seem smart, but the genuine intelligence of a person who pays attention and who draws conclusions from what she pays attention to and who applies the conclusions to the decisions she makes. She had the specific ambition that the intelligent children of farming families sometimes develop when the intelligence looks around the farm and sees that the farm is not the geography that the intelligence is built for. Not the crude ambition of wanting to escape, which is a simpler and less interesting thing than what Donna Reed had. The specific ambition of knowing that the self she was in the process of becoming was a self that required a larger geography than Denison, Iowa could provide, and of organizing herself toward that larger geography with the practical, disciplined efficiency of a girl who has been watching the farm teach her parents the lesson that the farm always teaches. which is that the resources are limited and the work is hard and the preparation for the possibility of something different has to begin before the different thing is available. She won a beauty contest, Denison, Iowa, 1938. The specific form of the beauty contest, the precise name and the precise mechanism, is described differently in different accounts, which is a small inconsistency, but one that reflects the pattern I will describe more fully in a moment, which is the specific quality of Donna Reed's relationship to the documented facts of her own origin. What is consistent? She won. The winning produced attention. The attention produced the scholarship to Los Angeles City College that allowed her to go to Los Angeles. The going to Los Angeles produced the screen test. The screen test produced the MGM contract. She arrived at MGM in 1941. She was 20 years old. She had been on the farm in Iowa less than 2 years earlier. The speed of the transition from Denison, Iowa, to a screen test at MGM is the speed of a person who had been preparing for the transition before the transition was available, who had been developing the qualities that the transition required in the context of the farm and the beauty contest and the city college, and who was therefore ready for the speed when it arrived. MGM processed her with the thoroughness that MGM brought to the processing of young women who arrived with the combination of face and screen test response that suggested commercial utility. The name was retained. She became Donna Reed, not a manufactured name in the sense of a name entirely different from her own, but a version of her own name adjusted for the specific commercial requirements of the marquee. She was cast. She appeared in films. The films were not immediately significant. She was, in the early MGM years, the kind of contract player that the studio processed in quantity. Appearing, being professional, being good in the specific way of a young actress who is good without yet having found the material that will make the goodness unmistakable. The material that made the goodness unmistakable came in 1946. Frank Capra was making It's a Wonderful Life. He cast Donna Reed as Mary Hatch, the woman who loves George Bailey. The woman whose love is the specific, steady, anchoring love that the film requires as the counterweight to George Bailey's specific, restless, occasionally anguished relationship with his own life and his own place in the world. The role required from her a quality of warmth that was not generic. Not the warmth of a character who is warm because the script requires it, but the warmth of a specific person whose warmth has a specific character, whose love for George Bailey is both total and intelligent, who sees him clearly and loves what she sees, and who is, in the specific quality of her seeing and her loving, the moral center of a film that has a lot of moral centers. She gave it. The performance is, in the collective understanding of everyone who has seen the film across the 70 years since its release, one of the essential things about the film. Not the most celebrated thing because the film's celebration tends to organize around Jimmy Stewart's performance, but one of the things without which the film would not be the film. Mary Hatch is the reason George Bailey's life has the specific shape it has. The reason the alternative reality that the film imagines is the specific horror it is, and Donna Reed gave Mary Hatch everything the role required with a completeness and a naturalism that the decades of the film's canonical status have confirmed as genuinely exceptional. Then came From Here to Eternity in 1953. Fred Zinnemann directed it. The film was the adaptation of James Jones's novel about the American military in Hawaii in the months before Pearl Harbor, and the specific quality of the novel, the frank treatment of sexuality and violence, and the specific moral compromises of military life, made the adaptation a project that required from its performers a willingness to inhabit material that the Hollywood of 1953 was not uniformly comfortable with. She played Lorene, the woman who works in a brothel and who forms a relationship with Prewitt, the soldier played by Montgomery Clift. The role was, in the context of Donna Reed's career to that point, a radical departure. not in the sense of the content being shocking in a way that the film's content did not require, but in the sense of the specific kind of woman she was playing, the specific moral territory the role occupied, the distance between the warmth and domestic grace of Mary Hatch and the specific complicated compromised warmth of Lorene. She played it with total commitment. She played it with the same quality of specific, intelligent warmth that she had given Mary Hatch, but organized around a different set of circumstances and a different set of choices, and the quality survived the different organization in a way that confirmed that what the quality was not dependent on the specific moral context, but was something deeper and more portable. She won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. She was 32 years old. She had been in Hollywood for 12 years. She had been good in everything she had appeared in, but she had not been recognized in the specific way that the Academy's recognition recognizes. And the From Here to Eternity performance was the specific material that the recognition required to see what the 12 years had been producing. The Oscar was received. The career was at a point. And then the Donna Reed Show began. The show ran from 1958 to 1966, 8 seasons, 275 episodes. It was, across its run, one of the most watched shows on American television. It made Donna Reed one of the most recognized faces in American life in the way that only sustained, weekly, living room television can make a person one of the most recognized faces in American life. Not simply famous in the abstract, but specifically familiar in the way of a person who has been in your house once a week for 8 years. She was the producer of the show. This is the fact about the Donna Reed Show that the mythology of Donna Stone tends to obscure, because Donna Stone was a character without particular professional ambitions beyond the domestic sphere, and because the public understanding of the Donna Reed Show organized itself around Donna Stone rather than around the woman who was producing the show in which Donna Stone appeared. She was the executive producer. She held the creative control. She made the decisions about the stories and the casting and the specific quality of what the show was and was not going to be. This matters for the understanding of who Donna Reed was, because the executive producer is the person with the power, and the person with the power is not the person who is managed by the institution, but the person who is managing the institution. And the management of the Donna Reed Show across 8 seasons was the management of a person of intelligence and professional seriousness who had specific ideas about what the show should be and who had the authority to implement those ideas. The show was not simply a domestic comedy about a perfect American family. She has described, in interviews from the period and in the subsequent accounts of people who worked on it, a deliberate attempt to create a show that was warmer and more honestly domestic than the alternatives. That was not the sitcom of conflict and resolution, but the sitcom of life, of the ordinary texture of family relationships, of the specific kind of warmth that comes not from the resolution of dramatic conflict, but from the ongoing presence of people who love each other in the specific way of families that are genuinely functional. She had opinions about the war. This is the thing about Donna Reed's private life that the Donna Stone years most completely obscured, and that the people who have written about her since have found most interesting. She was, through the early 1960s and into the late 1960s, deeply and publicly opposed to the Vietnam War. She was one of the founders of Another Mother for Peace, an organization of women who opposed the war and who used their status as mothers to make the specific argument that mothers had a particular claim on the question of whether their sons should be sent to die in wars of choice. This was not a safe position for a woman whose commercial viability was organized around her identity as the ideal American mother. The specific connection between the Donna Stone identity and the Another Mother for Peace activism was a connection that her management and the network were not uniformly comfortable with, because the connection risked the specific kind of commercial damage that occurs when a performer whose brand is warmth and domestic harmony becomes publicly associated with political controversy that divides the audience that has organized itself around the warmth and the domestic harmony. She did it anyway. She did it with the specific quality of conviction that the people who knew her offset described as one of her defining characteristics. The conviction of a person who has concluded that something is right and who is not prepared to compromise the conclusion for the commercial consequences of maintaining it. She did it in the same period in which the Donna Reed show was still running, which meant she was doing it while the network was watching, and while the sponsors were watching, and while the audience that had organized itself around Donna Stone was watching. The show ended in 1966. The ending was the ending that television shows tend to have when the specific commercial logic of the network that carries them has concluded that the specific commercial logic of the show has run its course. She was 45 years old. The career continued. It continued in the way that careers continue after the defining role has ended, with work that is real and professional and good, in formats and at scales that are different from the peak, but that are not empty, that reflect the genuine professional quality of the person doing the work, even when the work itself is not the work that the peak had established. She remained active in the peace movement. She remained active in the political dimensions of the life that the Donna Stone years had organized around the show, and that the show's ending had released her to pursue more fully. She was, in the years between the end of the Donna Reed show and the beginning of the Dallas season, a person who was living the full version of herself that the show had organized around the specific, useful, commercially successful partial version. The Dallas season, 1984 to 1985. She was offered the role of Miss Ellie when Barbara Bel Geddes left the show, and she accepted it in the specific way of an actress who is 63 years old and who is operating in a professional landscape that does not offer many roles to actresses of 63, and who understands that the offer, whatever its specific dimensions, represents an opportunity that the landscape is not generating in quantity. She was good in it. She was Donna Reed, which means she was warm and specific and present and intelligent in the specific way that the role of Miss Ellie required warmth and specificity and presence and intelligence. And the show's audience received her in the way that audiences receive performers of her quality in roles that are appropriately matched to their qualities. She was also, during the season, in the early stages of what the diagnosis would confirm. The specific nature of what she was experiencing during the filming, the symptoms, the management of the symptoms, the specific accommodations that the symptoms required, is described in the accounts of the people who worked with her in terms that are the terms of careful accounts about difficult things, which is to say, not fully. What is established? She was not well during the filming. She was managing something that the filming required her to manage alongside the work. She managed it with the professional commitment that she brought to everything. And the audience watching Dallas on Friday nights did not know. She made the phone call in December of 1985. She said the plain thing plainly. She died on January the 14th, 1986. She was 64 years old. The tributes that followed were the tributes of a culture that had organized its understanding of Donna Reed around the Donna Reed show and around It's a Wonderful Life. And the tributes were warm and specific about those things, and were somewhat less specific about the other things. The Oscar, and the From Here to Eternity performance, and the Another Mother for Peace activism, and the specific quality of the woman who was the executive producer of her own show at a time when women were not the executive producers of their own shows, and the specific quality of the intelligence and the conviction that the Donna Stone years had made the background rather than the foreground of the public understanding of who she was. Now, my friend, let me close the case I have been building. The phone call to the producer in December of 1985 was the end of the story that the Donna Stone years had organized around a specific, sustained, commercially successful management of the public and the private. The Donna Stone years had produced a public version of Donna Reed that was warm and domestic and uncomplicated, and the public had loved it. And the love was deserved in the sense that the warmth was real and the domestic quality was real, and the uncomplicated quality was the quality that the show had decided to present, rather than the full complexity of the woman presenting it. The full complexity included the Oscar and the activism and the executive producer credit and the specific quality of a woman who had come from a farm in Iowa and who had concluded, somewhere in the process of becoming Donna Reed, that the conclusion was the intelligence she was going to trust, and the trust was going to be extended to the conclusion regardless of the commercial consequences of extending it. She trusted the conclusion about the war. She trusted the conclusion about what the show should be. And on the day she made the phone call in December of 1985, she trusted the conclusion about the diagnosis, which was that the diagnosis was real and the work was not going to be possible, and the plain statement of the plain fact was the only appropriate response. She said it plainly. She hung up. She died 6 weeks later. The television was on when they found David Jansen. Donna Reed made a phone call. These are the specific, concrete, small human acts that the endings of large human lives are made of, and they are more revealing than the tributes and the Oscar and the canonical status of It's a Wonderful Life and the 275 episodes of The Donna Reed Show, because they are the acts of the person rather than the acts of the image. She walked on stage dying. The audience watched. The audience did not know. She was Donna Reed until the end. And at the end, in the phone call to the producer, she was also, for the first time in a very long time, maybe for the first time since the farm in Iowa, simply herself. Donna Bell Mullinger from Denison, Iowa, telling the plain truth about the plain situation one last time before she went home. Sleep well, my friend. And the next time you see Mary Hatch waiting for George Bailey, see both women. See the one who is in the frame. And see the one who is behind the frame, the woman from Iowa who played the game the industry required, and who also, quietly and consistently, and against the specific current of what the game required, trusted the conclusion and said the plain thing when the plain thing needed to be said. She said it. It was enough. It had to be enough. And it was.